Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to Polkadot Decoded and to my talk. I know that it's the end of the second day, so probably many of you are already tired. I will start with a very short history excursus, but from the data point of view. The optics here is that if we look at Web3 as a whole, it's really a story about owning the data and our data being sovereign. Let's get back to the dinosaur era, basically, to the era of Bitcoin. Back then, not your keys, not your money. And for that, if you look at from the data perspective, that means that you have your own string in the Bitcoin blockchain, which basically says, okay, this is how much money I have. This UTXO belongs to me. Then Ethereum came about, and it all started with a very simple smart contracts and very simple data. But the crucial difference was that the complexity has grown a little bit compared to BTC, but at the same time, you still have full control of how you interact with the blockchain. So all your transactions are still there, and you can retrieve it even now, after many years. Then there was a really a Cambrian explosion that led to the DeFi summer of 2020. And the complexity of the application has grown considerably. And it's also the value of this data, because it was all about financial transactions. And again, all your financial data is owned by you because you made these transactions and you can access it at any time. Okay, now, as a user, you have dozens of options where you can where you can put your money and interact with the chains. And now, as a user, you have a trace of your presence across many chains. And we are now entering the multi-chain era. So the next two graphs that I'm going to show you are probably the most important to understand what is the data landscape where we're going into. So first of all, with the introduction of L3 chains, parathreads, parachains, and pretty much all the major EVM chain introducing app chains, the number of data now grows quadratically, because each chain produces the data continuously, and the number of chains is growing rapidly. So we are now at approximately 100 terabytes, give or take, of compressed data. And I believe that, like in 1-2 years, we're probably going to approach like 1 petabyte or so. This is a huge amount of data, but you as a user care about only like maybe 10 kilobytes out of it. At the same time, this important graphic shows that the number of monthly active users also explodes exponentially. And we all believe that this trend is going to grow. This data is from MetaMask. I don't think that we should really care like about differentiation, like what is Polkadot, what is EVM right now, because like all we care is really about people going into crypto, into Web3, and it is clear that the number of users grows, and the complexity of the interactions with the network also grows. So the number of transactions and the complexity of the data each user produces also increases. That adds up to the total mass of data that is currently stored on-chain. What is more to that is that we are now entering the era of dApp chains. And I would probably true to say that this thesis is confirmed, as we see every pretty much big L1 or L2 following the path of Polkadot and Cosmos and launching their op-chain. And we are now see that every project will eventually probably land up into its own app chain. But the key issue here is that the infrastructure for these smaller chains is not existent. And the data that is going to be stored by these smaller blockchains is fragmented, so it is not really possible to collect this data altogether. And when we talk about the infrastructure, we normally so what I mean by saying the infrastructure is missing is that if you're like a small chain, you have really big problems coming into providers like Alchemy or Etherscan, because they probably do not care about you at all, unless you pay really big money so that you can have your logo in Alchemy and you have Etherscan. We have a pretty much similar situation in Polkadot, not as severe, but still, as a parachain, you have a lot of expenses related to keeping up the fleet of RPC providers, figuring out how to build an explorer or like pay for an explorer. This really elevates the barrier for entry for new projects. At the same time, we all believe that it should be as easy as launching a mobile app and uploading into App Store or launching in a blog to build an app. So we at Subsquid really have this mission of radically democratizing access to on-chain data. And specifically in the era of app chains, this become crucial to make the onboarding and accessibility of the data that is really hard to obtain with existing tools. So where we are right now in the Polkadot space is that we already provide backbone data through 40+ archives for parachains. And what is important is that if you're a small project and if you're just running a testnet, what it takes is just 2-3 days and a simple application through our Google form to keep the archive running, and we do it completely for free, and it is funded by the Treasury. Still, this process is centralized and the archives are run on our servers. What we are going into is a completely new era and completely new approach. We are decentralizing our archives and are gradually replacing it with the Subsquid Network. So the Subsquid Network is a permissionless way to share and to store an arbitrary amount of historical data and make it available for all the existing indexing tools across for all chains, testnets, parachains, you name it. The beauty is that the data is distributed across the nodes in the network, so you get the reliability of the whole network no matter how small is your data set. And the data is easily accessible, so you can run expressive filters to retrieve exactly the data you need. So that enables analytics, fast indexers, and at the end of the day, it allows you to reduce your infrastructure spend up to 90%, because most of the time the RPC nodes are used in order to retrieve the data, not to write, because the users are mostly reading this data from the screen, consume it from the analytic dashboards, but actually sending the transaction is normally not an issue. Going into the way that how enabling the permissionless and distributed layer of on-chain data enables further advance of the Web3 is the possibility to run very lightweight indexers for the data. The indexers developed with Squid SDK are called Squids. Currently, you can develop them and run in our hosted platform called Aquarium. But our real goal is to make it so easy that you can run an indexer inside the client, meaning that you can run an indexer directly into your dApp, which is run inside a browser or a mobile application. That would be like a radical improvement over the whole infrastructure architecture that we have right now. That way, we will completely eliminate the need of a server that keeps the index data. Why this is a big deal? Well, because if you have indexer run into your device, you can enrich and access the private data, off-chain data, and combine it into and have a cross-chain picture of it. And what is even more important, you scale this up to an infinite number of users. So the more users you have, the more reliant is the solution, because there is no server which keeps the data that serves it to the user. A simple example would be a wallet. Assume that you have like 10 million users in the Web3, and you are building a wallet and you want to show the transaction history for each of them. The way that it is built right now is that you have a huge database where all these transactions are stored, and you want to serve it in a responsive way. You spend a lot of time and money building this high availability database. But if the transaction history for each individual user is stored exactly at the user's phone, you don't need to have any infrastructure whatsoever, while each user has exactly the same data as it has right now in the wallet. This shift from the client-server architecture to the client-based indexing and the data lake is the way that we see how decentralization will proceed in the future with Web3. Okay, but when? What is the timeline for launching the Subsquid network? The roadmap is as follows. The AeroSquid SDK, which is capable of indexing data sourcing from the network, is already released. Even though the network is not live yet, you can always experience how it's going to work from the indexing perspective. At the end of August, we plan to launch a private testnet, meaning that the node providers are invite-only, while users can join and participate and in anticipation of the airdrop. Then there are going to be extended public testnet by the end of the year. And finally, we aim to launch a mainnet in Q1 2024, assuming everything goes smoothly. In order to join a whitelist for a Subsquid network, scan this QR code and fill the form. So you can join either the infrastructure provider or a user who will deploy an indexer or just like poke around and see how it goes. We actually have quite a lot of time, around 5 minutes. So at this point, I would welcome any questions related to the Subsquid network, any technical details. Everything is a fair game. Yep. The forum is not opening? Oh, wait.
No proper question.
Rasim, can you fix it? Well, that means that we test and prod. But the question was about something different, right? No, I asked to make you aware of it. Okay.
So you talked about archives and squids, and you mentioned that the future squid is going to run in the browser. What about the archive? And isn't there going to be a bottleneck on the archive eventually when you have like thousands of squids accessing?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the archives are going to be replaced by the Subsquid network. So basically, all the heavy lifting and terabytes of data are stored by the network. And squids are indexers that extract the data relevant only for specific users. So that's why it will be possible to make them very lightweight and store a manageable amount of data at the client side. So this is the power of separating the concerns, right? So the huge data lake, which is distributed, replicated, is run by the nodes. And the client user, the end users, they have just the data that they care about. And the SDK is designed in such a way that the indexing should be within seconds, as long as you consume not much data, because the Subsquid network is very efficient not only for storing data, but also for retrieving it. So you basically can ask him, OK, give me transactions that were sent to this address and sent from this address. And you just get the list and you display it immediately. OK, I'm going to get back.
I mean, I'm on a run here. So one of the interesting things that you talked about was multi-chain and how people are moving money around, like from Moonbeam to Interlay and to Statement, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. And I think you offer like a multi-chain archive or something. So is the new world? Is it automatically multi-chain and everything is like just magically? Like if I ask for one address, it's going to give me all chains, or I can say I want this one address and all these chains, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a really great question again. So the way it works is that the Subsquid network is a data lake which has no information how the data is structured. It's basically like raw data dumped from the network, but in order to compile multi-chain history, you run indexers that extract data for each particular chain, but they write the data into the same database. And the indexers are responsible for transforming and presenting this data exactly in a way that is suitable for UI. And it is automatically presented as a GraphQL API afterwards. So this is what Subsquid SDK is about. So what Subsquid Network solves is really the data layer problem.
Let's give a round of applause for Dima. Thank you so much. Take it from you.